You're listening to the Infinite Banking Mastery Podcast. Did you know that you could build a tax-free pool of wealth that's liquid and accessible all your life while building your retirement nest egg? Gain full control of your financial future and stop relying on the government and banks. The wealthy have already discovered this wealth-building secret. Now it's your turn to get financially secure without following the conventional wisdom that keeps you in debt to banks. Now here's your host, Valerie LaRocque.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, as I record, it happens to be Election Day. I'm all decked out in my USA gear for Election Day. Everyone's on the edge of their seat, waiting to see what will happen. But by the time you hear this podcast, it will have been a couple of weeks already. And so I hope that you're feeling at peace with whoever's in charge. So today, continuing on with the book, we've been going through the different sections of Nelson's book. I don't plan to go through all the sections exactly, but we are still working at the beginning. And this is Becoming Your Own Banker, in case you're tuning in for the first time, Nelson Nash. So now we're on to a section called Creating Your Own Banking System Through Dividend-Paying Life Insurance. So Nelson starts off this section with a quote that I have mentioned a few times, is one of my favorites. And that quote is that you finance everything you buy. You either pay interest to someone else or you give up interest that you could have earned. He points out that there is always an alternative use of money that some or most people would call opportunity cost. So when you buy something, you are losing out on the opportunity to invest those dollars or put them somewhere where you could have been earning interest. And that is the opportunity cost. You've lost the opportunity to do something different with those dollars. I decided to Google it and see what the AI overview was for opportunity cost, and it came out pretty good. I thought it stated it pretty well. It said that the value of the best alternative that is given up when a choice is made. I thought that was really well put because that's exactly what's happening. Nelson then brings up the concept of EVA, Economic Value Added, which was developed by Stern Stewart and Company of New York City. Nelson mentions an article called The Real Key to Creating Wealth that was written by Sean Tully in an issue of Fortune magazine in September of 1993. I actually have a copy of this article if it happens to be something you are interested in reading. Nelson summarizes a bit from this article and says, before being introduced to EVA, Economic Value Added, corporations were borrowing capital from banks and paying interest, but they were treating their own capital as if it had no cost. When they realized this and started valuing their capital in the same way that they did the banks, their profits increased, and dramatically. And here's another of Nelson's great quotes, which he says is EVA's basic premise. If you know what's really happening, you'll know what to do. He applied this statement to the infinite banking concept as well, and I mentioned it before in one of the previous podcasts because it applied there too. If you know what's really happening in the world with your money, you'll know what to do. Or if you know what's really happening when it comes to the fact that you're losing the earning power of your dollars when you don't first house them in an efficient, safe, and guaranteed vehicle, well, once you learn that, you'll know what to do. And I would help with figuring out your budget for starting a policy. Sometimes I help my clients find the money if they don't think they can afford to begin a policy. I can usually help them think through finding the money to start. Just thinking through, are we overpaying credit cards? We could take some money from there. Are we receiving a tax return that we either can change around so we're not receiving the tax return all year and then use those funds to start a policy? Or even if the tax return is coming up, maybe we can access those funds and help it to boost or start off a policy. Sometimes certain loans or credit cards are being overpaid and we can redirect those dollars, fund a policy, and then come back and pay off those debts anyway. But we're going to do it capturing the earning power of those dollars and in a more efficient way. So I can be helpful in all those things, trying to help you piece together and figure out how to begin. But actually, once my clients fully understand and also understand how the funds in the policy are accessed, how easy it is to access those funds, well, they know what to do. and they almost always know the amount that they can or would like to start with to fund a policy. Although, of course, I'm here to help. I can help you think through all that stuff. But oftentimes, once they really understand, then they know what will be comfortable and where they'll be able to start. In fact, a very common question once a person understands really well is, how much can I put in? I'm asked this question almost every time a person or a client fully understands infinite banking, the whole process. They've read the book, they've done their research, they've done their homework. Then that's usually the question, how much can I put in? Okay, so from there, then Nelson goes on to describe the process the life insurance company takes to come up with, create, and put in place any life insurance policy. There's the actuaries, the rate makers, and the lawyers. And these are three of the main parties it takes to put a policy together. Of course, there are other employees besides those. But the actuaries' job is to estimate the risk. They use statistical data to do that. They are considering different things such as age, gender, tobacco usage, marijuana usage. Actually, I will digress here for a moment. When it comes to marijuana, if you happen to smoke marijuana and you use it a few times a month, maybe not all the time or every day, but a few times you smoke marijuana, that actually the underwriters are getting more lenient on that, which is great to a lot of people. You are able to still oftentimes get a standard non-tobacco rating, even though you are smoking marijuana. It used to always be an automatic smoking rating. So now it's possible to get a non-smoking rating even while using tobacco. And also I think it can be up to 2 cigars a month that can be smoked and still be considered non-tobacco. Although if it is prescribed by a doctor, marijuana usage, then it's going to be a harder time. You may be declined altogether. Maybe you will be able to be approved. It might just be a smoking rating. They are more concerned with it being prescribed by a doctor than you just choosing to smoke it recreationally. Okay, so back to the topic. So this is what the actuaries are doing. They are estimating the risk using these different categories of information. And then that information is used to set the rates, set the costs of the insurance for men and women at their different ages. Once that has been completed, now bring the lawyers in. They create legal and binding contracts that the life insurance agents will be helping potential buyers with. And as I just mentioned, there are a lot of other essential roles at the life insurance company that keep everything running smoothly. Also, life insurance contracts are unilateral, meaning that they will deliver on the statements and promises written into the contract. So as long as the client holds up their end of the deal by making premium payments, the life insurance company holds up their end of what's stated inside the contract. Nelson says, read the contract and it will tell you very plainly that you are the owner of the contract, not the company, and that the owner outranks every potential borrower in access to the money that must be lent. And what he can borrow is 100% of his equity in the contract. In essence, money can be lent to other places only if the owner of the policy does not exercise his option to use the money and pay interest instead. So you have the first right to that money and can access it for any reason. And if you're not borrowing against the account, then the insurance company will definitely be investing the money in something because they need to make a certain amount of money to be able to pay the promised death benefits, to pay the employees, to pay all the people I just mentioned, to pay the agent who helped you, business taxes, and all the other expenses of the company. They need to make a certain amount of interest. And either you're borrowing the money and paying them the contractual amount of interest stated in the contract, or they're investing it somewhere else to make that interest. Insurance companies invest in things like bonds and mortgages. And because there are new clients acquiring policies all the time and people continuing to make their premium payments every year, the company has a continuously increasing pool of money that's just getting bigger and bigger all the time. Nelson then describes that at the end of a year, the company executives talk to the accountants about how well the company did that year in comparison to the assumptions they stated at the beginning of the year. the assumptions they started with when designing the contract. Keep in mind that the actuaries always build in a little more than what's needed in case costs are higher than expected. So at the end of the year, when they might find, for example, that they collected $150 for the year, and that would be the amount that they would need to collect every year going forward, but they actually only needed $120 to deliver on the promised future death benefit this year, now they have the difference to decide what to do with. Usually they will keep a portion in a contingency fund and then distribute the rest back to the policy owner. And this is not a taxable event. As Nelson puts it, the word dividend was used by the insurance industry to describe this dispersal, and it stuck with us. But the correct classification is a return of premium or a return of capital. And this is not a taxable event in the eyes of the IRS. Lucky for us. Now, the policy owner is not required to allow the dividend to purchase additional paid-up insurance. However, this is what an IBC practitioner will advise. The result is an ever-increasing tax-deferred accumulation of cash values that support an ever-increasing death benefit, as Nelson puts it. Now, switching gears to Dave Ramsey for just a moment, because Dave Ramsey, this is one of the most aggravating things that I've heard Dave Ramsey say, that we're all being fooled because we're only receiving back the premium that we overpaid rather than an actual dividend. But I'm telling you, if in 10, 20, or 30 years, I have access to every single dollar that I've paid into the contract and then some, I really don't care what they call it. They can call it whatever they want. And every year, the cash value is higher and higher and grows more and more efficiently and grows more than the year before. So if I'm paying $10,000 into my policy and my cash value grows by $20,000 or it grows by $30,000, well, I'm going to say I'm pretty happy with that. I don't care if you call it a dividend or return of premium. I don't care. If the richest people in the nation own whole life insurance or permanent insurance, if 4,000 of the nation's banks own permanent life insurance, well, it must not be such a bad thing to own. They must be onto something. So that's all I'm going to talk about for today. There are a lot more details, and Nelson goes into a lot of different helpful discussion on these topics in his book. So I still think it's great to pick it up and look it over. Get a copy. You should all have your own copy, and you should all read it on a regular basis, not just one time. But if you're feeling ready, you're feeling like, okay, I'm ready to start a policy, I would like to work with Valerie, feel free to reach out to me at valerie@alphaomegawealth.com. I hope that you had a great week. I hope that you are at peace with the election, and I hope that you are looking forward to the holidays, spending time with your loved ones next week for Thanksgiving, because there is much to be grateful for. I'll talk to you next time. Take care.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.